moderate this session. And this session's topic is seeking the best PPP projects for the One Belt One Road initiative. And there are so many PPP projects in so many countries in the world. But until now, I know there are only 2 countries with more than 1,000 PPP projects. One country, of course, is China, and the second country is Brazil. So it means all other countries, don't have PPP projects, more than 1,000. So only, for example, only for Singapore, only 13 projects, and for Ireland, only 19 PPP projects. But for China nowadays, only for the past 3 years, more than 1,000 PPP projects. So, and many projects is a huge ones with so many, large investments. So today, the topic is about, seeking the best PPP projects for the One Belt One Road initiative. And there are several, together we are focusing on such kind of topics. Is the record of huge projects in Asia, positive or negative? And what have been the lessons? And how can One Belt One Road projects be accomplished, and at the same time ensure they contribute to the sustainable future? What social and environmental standards should they follow? And can they contribute to people-first PPPs? So here I'd like to introduce today's presenters and some panelists. So Kwang Shi, professor from Taiwan and former Minister of Transportation and Communications. And Ting Mei, General Manager, Shenzhen Water Group. And Gui Guo Wang, President, International Academy of the Belt and Road, Hong Kong. And I think I have 4 panelists. Kai-Meng Li, General Director, China International Engineering Consulting Corporation, and Alinda and Igor from Belarus, and Alexander from Russian Federation. No? And
it's Igor. Igor from Belarus.
Okay, yeah. And Art Smith, Chairman, UNECE team of specialists on PPPs. Okay, thank you all. So first of all, let's introduce, invite 4 and 3 presenters to give keynote presentation. How about here or there? Okay, so welcome Professor Kwang Shi.
In order for me to communicate more clearly, I'm going to use Mandarin. Is that okay? 我想呢，这个基本上我今天要用20分钟嘛，15分钟哈，15分钟的时间呢，讲很快的讲一下我们。
15 to 20 minutes. I would like to quickly brief you about the high-speed train development in Taiwan and our experience, and for the large-scale PPP projects and what we have learned. So first of all, the high-speed train in Taiwan, we have adopted the BOT model, and the scale from the start to now is around 556 billion Taiwan dollars. So $1 US is about 30 Taiwan dollars. So the scale is 560 billion Taiwan dollars. And in the past, before we carried out the high-speed train in BOT, and we never really had any PPP models in Taiwan. And once this started, this was the biggest in the world, and the government spent about 105 billion, and the private sector spent about 450 billion. And last year, our high-speed train faced a crisis of bankruptcy because the depreciation is too high, so we extended it for another 35 years, and now the whole project has been stretched to 70 years. So one of the owner is the Taiwan. One of the owners are the Taiwan Transport Ministry, and the other one is the high-speed train company in Taiwan. So what are the lessons learned? First, since 1987, when we initiated this plan, until 2016, we had to go through a restructuring. And so we have been through 2 regime changes in Taiwan, and we had 7 presidents during this period, and we have had change of 16 of the ministers of transport. So for such a large-scale project, and one of the biggest challenges is the stability of the government. Because at every change of the government, they will have different views, different preference, which may cause disturbance to the civil or the private company, and which may also affect whether the project could be completed on time. And the high-speed train, the main purpose was to connect it with the western part of Taiwan. When we started the bidding process, it was divided into 3 parts. The first part is for the civilian companies, things that they must do. Second is jobs that the government must do, for example, the obtaining of the land and supervision. Thirdly, for some engineering and some safety supervisions that can be done by private companies or the government. If the private companies were to do so, they would ask, how much I need to spend on it. So those are the 3 parts. Later on, we had 2 companies who came for the bidding. So the company which won the bid compared with the one which lost, the total cost budgeted is actually 250 billion less. And for the government, they don't actually need money invested by the government. They have said that we can pay you back for the 150 billion. So the government awarded the bid to that company. There were a lot of issues caused by this. When there are such high-scale, large-scale companies, and is price the only thing that we need to consider? The other thing is the execution ability of the company, as well as the sharing of the risks. So those are all major issues that need to be considered. However, a lot of governments, when they are involved in the PPP projects, they only think about their return or the cost, rather than considering about the execution ability, which is a high risk. Then there was a delay of the signing of the contract by 2 years. During the building process, there were about another 1.5 years of delay. So the company which won the bid, the operation is actually 3.5 years slow behind their schedule. So this 3.5 years of delay had caused, cost to soar, and which caused financial issues to that company. In addition, during the development process, a lot of the banks and the financial institutions, they do not have experience in the BOT projects. So when this company, they want to borrow loans, because the banks do not understand about BOT and the return, they were not willing to lend. So when they were not able to obtain loans, they could not carry out the project. So the government had to come out and say that we will guarantee, we will back this project, and then the banks were willing to lend. But then we had another problem when there were guarantees provided, by the government. Does that still count for a BOT? Well, for developing countries, they do not have such experience. They do not have project financing experience. So the ability to increase or improve the abilities of the banks, this is another issue we had to face. Eventually, because of the government's interference, they were able to obtain the loan, so we started the project. After the high-speed train started running, we had another issue of the ridership, which is, we originally planned that would be 250,000 people riding it. However, since 2007, it's been in operation, and the 2 years before that, there were less than 100,000 people riding it every year. And at the moment, it's still 160,000 people riding it, and which is, again, 100,000 people fewer compared to their original plan in the bidding, and which has caused the return to be significantly less compared to what they had planned. And then the depreciation is very high, which means that we had to add another 35 years of concession. For the efficiency, actually, this is a very effective company. However, due to the financial obstacles and the concession issue, so we helped them with their debt restructuring. When they won the bid in 2000, the interest was very high. So a lot of the interest were about 8%. So we had to, repackage their loans and to help them to borrow new loans, so to help them with their difficulty one. And then in 2014 to 2015, they had another financial crisis. This is in accounting, according to the accounting rules, and they were on the brink of bankruptcy, and they had too many loans, and they had very little equity investment. So we had to carry out another major round of restructuring. First, we had to ask them to reduce their capital, and second, to increase the concession period. Some of the rights, we had to sell these rights to reduce their debt. By doing so, we were able to complete the financial restructuring. So last August, we have completed, their IPO. So during this process, during the process of restructuring, to whether you are reducing your capital or increasing your capital, no one would be interested unless you increase your concession period. And when you increase your concession period, and so who benefits from it? There were then arguments. So then we decided that the injection of the asset would be done by the government. Then, from the BOT project, we had to transfer it to the government. So in a way, we have changed it from BOT to BTO.
35年的特许期。
And also this 35 years of concession period. What was the calculation? And herein there's another issue. Why was it only 35 years of concession period when it was first decided in the first place? Why not longer? What was the calculation? Now, the Transport Department actually based on the express rail cars, and that is the replacement time period is usually 35 years for the train carriages for express rail. And for civil engineering projects, it's really 100 years or 70 years or 90 years. But the 35 years was because of the replacement rate of the carriages, of the trains. Now, as for recapitalization, because there were original shareholders, and by putting in more capital, the original shareholders stand to lose. So what about their interests? And also, with the extension of concession period to 70 years from 35 years, we calculated the IRR. It is 4.9%. And that is to say, we have set a cap. If the return each year is over 4.9%, they will have to put the excess into a separate fund. If it is less than 4.9%, they can dip into that fund and get some of the funds out to supplement. So each year, it will be capped at or kept at 4.9% IRR. And the advantages of so doing is that, one, the government is holding majority share. It is 53% of the shareholding of the Express Rail. So in a sense, it is an SOE, state-owned enterprise. And secondly, the original investment and the construction, the government had not footed a dollar. And the government was able to get the entire rail, and also the quality of the construction was very good. As for the original investors and shareholders, after calculation, well, basically, their original investment can now be recuperated. And that is to say, after 30 years, the investors had not made any money, meaning that after 30 years, they get their original amount of investment back with a tiny bit of upside. So that's basically the situation. Now, the reason why I mentioned this case, it is because there are a few lessons to be learned here. First of all, for private enterprises, for them to take up these kind of big projects is efficient. So for this high-speed rail, express rail, it is a very successful engineering project. But from a BOT point of view, it is a failure. And from then on, we have not done any BOT projects. So that is the first lesson. And from this angle, even though it is a failure from the BOT point of view, but from social benefit point of view, it is a good project. That's the first point. Second point, in the entire process, there is an issue of partnership. We talk about public-private partnership, where there are disputes, and in the process of this case, there were a lot of disputes. What is the resolution mechanism? We actually had a committee set up, and 3 members are from each side, plus 1 independent person, to form this resolution committee to resolve any disputes. But in the end, the committee dare not make decisions for major disputes. Actually, the third party was from the Transport Department. And in the end, what was good for the Transport Department may not be good for the other parties. And so the members actually dared not, were reluctant to make any decisions. So the committee was not really effective. And the third area is about risk. How shall I put it? Risk sharing in English, risk sharing. And there are 3 risks involved. 1, political risk, as we have mentioned just now, because there are powers changing hands, different terms of government, different presidents coming into position, and therefore they have different views of the projects, they have different supervisory styles, etc. So therefore there is political risk. In developing countries, there is more of this risk, and there are a number of ways to the government can force the private company to abide by the new regime's requirements. So this is one political risk. And secondly, the ridership fell short by 100,000 per period. And the reason why that was is because in Taiwan, after the completion of the express rail, there were 1 million businessmen who went over the channel to the mainland to work. And therefore, these heavy users, who are these businessmen, disappeared because of economic and economic changes. So for this kind of falling short of ridership, should this kind of risk be borne by the operator, by the government and the operator, or just by the government? Well, actually, it should be jointly borne by the two parties. But where public rights and, or rather, where in the developing countries the government is very strong, very often this kind of risk will be shirked by the government onto the shoulders of the private company. A third risk is about operation. Of course, this will have to be shouldered by the private company. And actually, the operation of the express rail was very efficient. All the risks were political risk and economic risks. And when it came to disputes, the contract, honoring the contract, usually where there is a dispute over contract, the government would have a lot of tools to make the private company to change the contract and follow the political decision or accept the political decision of the government. And this is very prevalent in the PPP projects of developing countries. And then there is also the moral risk. A lot of BOT projects in Taiwan, I discovered, the private company, because it has a lot of incentives for making money, for profit making. As for the government, the only incentive is not to run foul of the law. It doesn't have a very strong incentive to make money for the people or for the government. And therefore, in the BOT projects, very often it is seen that the private companies are smarter in the sense that they make more profit than was at first envisioned by the government. I'm not talking about the Taiwan Express rail, but a lot of such PPP projects are like that. And in the end, the people are not happy with the government because they see that these private companies are making inordinate amount of profits. And therefore, the governments turn around and started distrusting PPP and dropping this model. So we have talked about civil society in the two sessions earlier, and that is outside of the public, that is the government and the private entity. How do we bring in the civil society? Therein lies the matter of trust. And also, these the private company will have to honor the contract. All sides have to honor the contract. A contract is a contract. However, for developing countries, especially where there are elections and the government come under political pressure and constituency pressure, very often they change the contract to suit the constituency's demand. And this is another risk, a moral risk. And this is what I've learned from the Taiwan experience, sharing with you here. Thank you very much, Professor Ye, for your sharing. In the Qingdao seminar last year, I've also invited Professor Ye, and I've heard him and his excellent sharing. So, from a PPP point of view, the case study that he's mentioned is a failure. And at the time, it was one of the biggest PPP project there was in the world, so it attracted a lot of attention. Later on, our other guest speakers may want to comment on this. And here, I would like to ask people to note perhaps you're writing a book, as far as I know, on this case, and this will be made available in the mainland as well to learn from the experience. Now, transport is one, and another is in the area of water. For the mainland of China, there are two areas which adopted PPP. One is road transport, the other is in treatment of water. And next, I would like to ask the Shenzhen Water Authorities, Mr. May, to share with us his experience. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you. On behalf of the Shenzhen Water Authorities, I would like to share with you the water treatment cases under PPP model. Our Chair had mentioned just now, we have started with the PPP model in the area of water facilities and treatment. We started actually as early as 2004. And that was a time when the measure for administration of public utilities was promulgated. And that was a time when we started with PPP projects in the area of water sector. And then in 2014, the Ministry of Finance and also the Water Authority, Water Ministry, and also the Transport Ministry of China came up with a measure on the management and administration of public utilities. And we also came up with some PPP projects for water. And also in other areas as well. So we started early in 2004, and today I would like to share with you some of our experience. For the first batch of projects in 2014, it was the Anhui Quzhou wastewater processing project. Now, for this project, it started in November of 2014. The bidding was done in that month, and shortly after, we formed the operating company. In 2015, January, it started operation. So there was a very short lead time. And at the time, it was RMB 720 million RMB in terms of capitalization, and it included 2 operable treatment plants and also 750 kilometers of pipeline, both wastewater and clean water, and also the pump stations. So that was part of the assets. And the other part is the future investment, and that was 1 billion RMB. So that was the entirety of the project. Now, it's been in operation for 2 years now since the inception of the project, and so that was the first such project under the MOF, the Ministry of Finance promulgation. And it was selected as one of the model cases on the PPP. So, and we call it the Qizhou model. And I'll tell you later on as to why we call it the Qizhou model. There's special meaning to that. I'll explain later. And this was given high accolades by the government. And during the time of the 2 meetings, that is the National People's Congress, the Qizhou municipal government was actually interviewed by the media concerning this project. And it's also one of the chosen as a model under the Ministry of Finance PPP projects. And it is because in its design, it was very much suited to the needs. It went for an open bidding in terms of searching for a partner. And also it was all done according to the law. And the lead time was very short, from 2015 to 2017, 2 years. It's moving already. And also there were specialists and professional teams. And the professional teams took up professional work. And also the building of the pipeline network, the management of that, and was all very good. And in the 2015 and 2016, it came through tests, that is flooding tests along the Yangtze River Delta. There were flooding in 2015 and 2016, but because the pipeline worked very well, and therefore there were no mishaps. And also, therefore, the people in the area were happy and they benefited from this project. So that was the assessment given us by the government. And in fact, we were given a very positive evaluation by the government publicly. And if I may share with you some more about the project. First of all, it was a bidding process. At the time, there were 9 entities which were leading entities or companies in the industry, and we shortlisted the 9 to 4 for Anhui, Guozheng, etc. So there were 4 such companies shortlisted, and they came up with a bidding. And finally, we were able to set up in a very short time the operation company. Government was 20% of the stakes, held 20% of the stakes, the company 80%. So that is the company that was set up. And in that process, there were 4 agreements reached. One, the concession operation agreement itself. And this is the company's department, and the company, operation company, signed the agreement concerning the operation and all the arrangements. So that was signed between the municipal government and the project company. And then there is another agreement, the shareholders agreement. As I've mentioned, the government was a 20% stakeholder. So there has to be a shareholders agreement as well. So this is like a normal shareholders agreement. And then there is an asset transfer agreement, because there are assets to be transferred into the newly set up company. And the operation period was 25 years. And with this country set up, there will have to be financing as well. And the financing entity was there was a syndication loan, and the syndicate including the China Development Bank. And in fact, the banks were very energetic, and we didn't actually know how to, for a period, didn't know how to allocate among the banks as for the lending. But in the end, it was the State Development Bank leading for other banks in forming a bank syndicate to extend the loans to this company for operation. All right, is that right? My time is up? Oh, okay. Now, let me talk about the Chizhou model. First of all, the plant, the water plant and the pipelines was segregated. I mean, normally in China it works that way. But this time we have integrated both. So in the operation, it is easy for us to do planning. As I've mentioned, in 2015, 2016, there were floods from the Yangtze River, but on the other hand, we were able to go through unscathed because of this integrated management. And secondly, the government was a 20% stakeholder, and this is limited participation from the part of the government, meaning that it is not involved in everyday operation. The government has a veto power in the board. So where it comes to public safety, public security, the government has a vote. But otherwise, it is not involved in everyday operation. It is but a minor shareholder. So it is not involved in management. So this is social capital and the government coming together in a very effective manner. And thirdly, it is about payment, and that is, according to the Shenzhen water pipes network, we have come up with a payment, this water fee payment standards for Chizhou. And every year, every quarter, we will have a measurement. And we will have assessment as well for the for the efficacy and the productiveness of the company as well. That is to say, there is a payment, there is a mechanism for assessment of the operation of the company every quarter, every year as well.
This was quite difficult before because we have always been in the business of water investment. Sometimes some of the banks, they agree with financing, but for this project, we have been able to remove the obstacles. This is what I consider as a, has a groundbreaking meanings for the new Ministry of Finance. This is because we have benefited from their new policies and some of their changes in terms of obtaining loans. And another one is on our existing value. And, we have about the existing asset, we have about 700 million. Actually, they had a lot of problems, and we had to correct the issues first, and in addition, we also have the another additional 800 million in plan to deal with. So during this process, we need to discuss with the government to find a good way to solve the incremental issue. So we had been able to solve that by signing an additional supplementary agreement. In addition, for the urbanization, to combine the urban-rural area with the county areas, because at the moment for China, between the counties and the villages, they're all separated. Everyone has their own part of business, and for Qizhou, the supply of water as well as the discharging of water, they're all within our business. So all this we had managed to obtain these work through bidding, and the government also hoped that we could use the city level and to help with the county and even the village level. And going forward, we will be able to establish a new model to expand our business and to actually be able to have it cover the whole of Qizhou and to improve its efficiency, and which has also solved our overall management issue, which has in turn will lower our cost. We are working with various stakeholders, and various parties around us, and for the Qizhou model, and what is the exemplary meaning of it. For us being part of it, we believe that those are some of the areas that perhaps can be referenced by some other projects. First of all is to pay attention to the overarching design, and whilst you carry out the planning, you need to be clear about the relationship between the government, the market, and society. When we first started, the Qizhou government were not very clear about it. However, through our agency, Dayue, they were able to provide some training. We had some communications. So in terms of the overarching plan, we were able to find a very fair method and a very fair plan for everyone. Second is pay attention to the choice of your partner for the discharging of water business. Actually, there aren't many peers. Because in the past, those were all companies that were actually state-owned enterprises. And for us, Shenzhen Water, we started the water supply and discharging business very early in 2002. And for Beijing Water Discharging, they are a solely owned business. And for us, the 50% of our company is owned by the Shenzhen city-level SASAC. So we are not actually, solely owned ourselves, and we are a company that is dedicated to the water business. And when the government was looking at the short list, they have finally settled on some of the companies and the partners based on their, bidding price, etc., and their qualities. And this is also one of the keys why we were able to succeed in this business. And thirdly, is our innovative financing. In the past, when we invest in a project, either you ask the shareholders to provide investment, or you have guarantees from the government. But actually, this is not a real type of PPP. And this time, we were able to carry it out from beginning to the end. And the banks were very happy and very cooperative with us. And fourthly, to pay attention to the risk controls. This is very important, because if the interest of all the stakeholders are not balanced, it is difficult to keep the project going. Therefore, for us, how do we ensure the interest of all stakeholders are ensured? That is very important, because the cost keeps changing. How do we design a very good pricing mechanism, and how does the government supervise this mechanism? This is a very important factor. And the government had also issued measures on the pricing mechanism, and to help us ensure the interest of the enterprise, as well as the operation risks of the project. For example, we did encounter some problems. For example, we did not expect, the change in the tax scheme in China, and from the business tax to value-added tax. This new change, through our consultation later, we were able to resolve this issue. So those are some of the external factors that had caused changes, and the government shouldered this part of unexpected change. During our construction process, we have also faced a lot of problems. For example, the process is too long, because with the government, if your process is very long and the government is very urgent, this is different ways and mentalities of running projects. And those were all, we were all able to solve those issues through consultation. So therefore, you need to have a way to communicate and to reach a consensus, so that you can continue to progress with your project together. Fifth is the multiple participation by various parties and enhanced supervision. What does this mean? This means that, when we are discussing with the government, for the PPP projects, all relevant departments that are involved in the water sector will be involved. If you don't involve them, they will look for trouble for you. So what does that mean? That means, we need to provide understanding to these relevant departments, and we would also be able to have a very clear responsibilities sharing to different departments. We have also been able to obtain the support from the People's Congress, and we were able to write it down as regulations which would protect our benefits. And this whole process is a set of standard. And in the meantime, the third party had also been introduced. We also have the supervision from the public. We have the scoring system from the third party as well as the public. Due to this sort of evaluation and the supervision from the public, it has enhanced supervision on our project, on the quality as well as efficiency of the projects. This is very important to us, for it doesn't mean that we can relax after we win the bid. In addition, we still need to meet the request of the users. So we need to build trust. Sixth, for Qizhou model, this is our round one, of the exemplary projects, and we are now in phase 3. And so this project had been able to roll out to the building of roads and shantytown reforms and port building, etc. And I believe that this could even be extended to other areas, for example, urbanization, to continue to extend. And finally, I'd like to talk briefly about Shenzhen Water. This is a joint venture, the largest joint venture between China and foreign companies. And at the moment, we are a main organizational body belonging to the Water Supplying and Discharging Association under the Technology and Science Committee. We are the first company in China that has a postdoc stations. We own most patents among our peers. We also have some of the national level laboratories, and our water supplying scale now currently ranks #1 in China. And some of our main management efficiency indicators are as follows. We continue to lead. For example, we are the leaders in terms of the water supply ratio, and as well as our the water treatment per capita volume. We are still ahead of our peers. In terms of our business, it covers the following: the planning, investment, building, operation, the whole life cycle, and also our complete industrial system. Besides our water supplying and discharging business, we also have the optimization business, and those are all up to standard, and some of them, are at national level. Some of our investment business, about a few years ago, we have, expanded some of our investment, and we have also started working in comprehensive environmental business. For example, the treatment of sludge and the precipitation of rubbish, etc. And currently, we are also working on the rehabilitation of rivers and ecological systems. So those are the areas of work that we carry out. And for Shenzhen Water, in addition, in mega cities, we are working on improving the water quality. We'd like to improve the running water quality into drinking water as what is available in the West. And this is a very big project. We're working on it. Besides Shenzhen, currently we have business in about 20 cities, 7 provinces, and we're running 30 water projects. And our aim is that our quality of Shenzhen will serve the whole nation. Our quality will serve the whole society. And we hope that if there are opportunities provided to us together with the One Belt, One Road initiative, we're able to bring this to the rest of the countries along this belt and road. And thank you very much for your introduction on the Shenzhen model. And we're also benefiting from your services. And from the PPP perspective, actually, on one hand, we have infrastructure can be divided into 2 categories. One is economic, another one is social. And we have mentioned just now, actually, in the PPP projects, actually, some of them, they are being reviewed by the government. The governments are the clients, and they do not involve the citizens directly, and some of them, they serve the citizens directly. So for those, who serve the governments directly, it's value for money and it's very rational. But if your service, your clients are citizens, perhaps, you need to provide good quality at a cheap price. And sometimes the citizens, they like to hope for free services. And I have been to Ireland recently, and you know that Ireland, it is the only country in the world that they provide free water to its citizens. And the water network that the government controls is about 49%. This is what I have learned from my last month's visit to Ireland, and I think that perhaps we need to return to rationales, to be rational, not only the government but also the citizens. So due to time constraint, I think it's best that we move on to Professor Wang Gui-gu, and he is a famous law professor, and he is working in the One Belt One Road Academy in Hong Kong, and he will be taking the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a law professor. I will not speak for very long, as lawyers always charge for what they say. I enjoyed very much the previous speaker's discussion. I learned that they both mentioned in a PPP project, contract is very important. Risks are unavoidable. Dispute resolution, very important, because there are bound to be some disputes. They also talk about private contribution, private capital, and the government that Professor Yi mentioned may not contribute anything, yet they may have a project. I share very much what they say, because they talk about the project, but they have not really brought to us a project as a result of PPP. I'm a lawyer, so I do have a project with me, the end result of the PPP, but it's a PPP without government capital contribution, and we are looking for good results. I think most probably afterwards I will discuss with Professor Ye and Mr. Lei about how to convert this into a real PPP so that we can get some benefits from the government. I mean, that's a joke. You may recall toward the end of his discussion, Mr. Lei mentioned the One Belt and One Road. That is a very important project. It does involve a lot of countries, specifically, precisely 65 countries, and 28 country heads will meet in Beijing this coming weekend to talk about collaboration. I came back, actually, at 2 o'clock this morning from Beijing, where we discussed how to resolve the disputes arising from the implementation of a Belt and Road. Lawyers sometimes look for disputes, but most of the times try to help their clients avoid disputes. Law professors do not really need to look for disputes. We try to set up a system to avoid disputes, and in case there are disputes, to make sure that such disputes are resolved quickly and efficiently, as well as effectively. With that in mind, also keeping in mind the situation that the implementation of the Belt and Road will involve trade in goods, trade in services, investment, intellectual property, and other economic sectors. At the same time, we consider, and what Professor Ye and Mr. Lei discussed confirm the point that in most of the projects, in connection with the Belt and Road, may involve three tiers of relationships. One is government to government. The other is enterprise or private persons with the government. The third type of relationship would be entities with entities. So with these three types of relationships existing, there are bound to be at least three types of disputes. One is the disputes between governments, in most of the cases, trade, in particular, arising from the governmental arrangements. The other type is really like investment disputes, where foreign investors enter into the territory of another country. If they are not happy with what the local government does or not do, then there would be some disputes. Or commercial disputes among enterprises is a common phenomenon. I don't think we need really to talk about it. What is special about these three types of relationship is that, in our view, in most of the cases, the common law practice, common law skills, litigation skills, common law values are in a dominant position. Also, in most of the cases, I would say that the Western experts, Western culture dominate these three type of disputes. And as the Belt and Road Initiative is a result of the Western countries' efforts, and also as among the 65 countries along the Belt and Road, most of them are non-common law countries. We consider it is important to create something for the Belt and Road countries in their collaborative efforts in connection with the Belt and Road Initiative. For that purpose, the International Academy for the Belt and Road organized a small working group consisting of experts from Malaysia, India, Singapore, Korea, mainland China, and Hong Kong. And this working group worked for more than a year, drafted a set of mediation and arbitration rules, which are contained and published in this Blue Book. After the working group worked on the project, and after numerous debates, disagreements, I would say even very difficult disagreements, if not disputes. Finally, the group agreed to a set of rules. And thereafter, we distributed these rules to more than 30 countries, and we received support from 49 experts from more than 30 countries. They gave their support to this new set of rules, which including complaint or good offices as the starting point for any dispute involving the government, mediation or conciliation as a compulsory step before arbitration. Arbitration, insofar as investment arbitration is concerned, an appeal system is built in. We emphasize on the transparency requirements in connection with any dispute involving governments. We also emphasize on the code of conduct of arbitrators, mediators, so that disputes can be resolved fairly and effectively. For instance, we suggested that mediators, once they serve as mediators, may not subsequently serve as arbitrators. By the same token, arbitrators, once they start the case, and if the parties agree to resolve the dispute or try to resolve the dispute through mediation, arbitrators may not serve as mediators. They need to get another set of persons to do so. So that disputing parties will have confidence in the mediators, and they can disclose what they may not want to disclose in the arbitration proceeding, so that disputes can be resolved through mediation, which is our effort, and which is representing the Eastern culture. Anyway, I know that time is short. I don't want to spend too much time discussing the details. I do want to say that throughout this project, it is the private capital behind it. The government, including the Hong Kong government and the central government, did lend their support. For instance, when we released the Blue Book, a vice president, a grand judge of the Supreme Court of China came. The chief executive of Hong Kong presented at the meeting, and we do appreciate what they did for us. And now we are in the process of formulating or establishing a body that will use these rules. And in this current process, again, we emphasize on the private participation, not only private participation or private entities, individuals from Hong Kong or from China or from Asia. We look for private participation through all the countries along the Belt and Road and beyond. Because for this Blue Book, the initiators include those from Japan, those from Australia, and those from the United States. We look forward for further collaborations from all the experts, all the friends throughout the world. Thank you very much.
好，谢谢王教授刚才的精彩的演讲。其实我去年就“一带一路”，其实我在香港的《东方财经》杂志发过6篇文章，然后其中有2篇文章是谈到了。
One Belt, One Road, and a few articles, of which 2 were about this topic, and that is for Hong Kong to play a role in One Belt, One Road. One of the areas is in this dispute resolution. First of all, there will have to be a summit meeting for One Belt, One Road. Last year, there was one such summit. And then also there will have to be an expo for the commodities offered on One Belt, One Road. And thirdly, services, accounting, legal, etc., financial services. If there can be a platform built in Hong Kong to showcase all these services in support of One Belt, One Road, that would be very good. AIIB, it supports the just One Belt, One Road, and PPP is a model for investing in One Belt, One Road. And I'm very happy to have heard the presentation of Professor Huang. And next we will have some heavyweight speakers as well. And you will be responding to the content of the presentation of the three previous speakers. If you can give us some short commentaries. Cameron, if you can start with that. The three speakers come from Taiwan, the mainland, and also from Hong Kong. The three experts have approached PPP from different angles. And herein, we're talking about how to find the best PPP projects. What we have to consider is that for the Taiwan project, the Suzhou water project in the mainland, we ask whether these are the these will help us find the best PPP projects. What are the best PPP projects? Why would one find the best PPP projects on the One Belt, One Road area? We have to grasp this historic opportunity of One Belt, One Road to implement, to come up with and implement the new model of PPP. First of all, we have to understand in the area of One Belt, One Road, what is the kind of PPP model that we're talking about? My understanding, it is about sustainable development PPP model, and it is people-oriented. So it is a new model of PPP, not the old model of PPP. I say there are three types of PPP. It started in the UK. They first came up with this concept, and that is in the 1990s. And for that type of PPP, we call it the first generation PPP. And it is about how to use financial capital to raise the effectiveness and efficiency of the government in providing public utilities. So the main point was about the effective and efficient use of public funding. And then the PPP, some of the operation and value system came from that first generation of PPP. It was widely accepted internationally, and sometimes, very often, when we understand PPP model, we're thinking about that model. But today, for China and some of the developing countries, we are transforming into the second generation of PPP with the emphasis of promoting economic development through the tool of PPP. So the developing countries in adopting this new PPP model, where they have the need to have very rapid economic development, they will have to utilize PPP as a tool for marketization, for promoting the development of the economy. So PPP is no longer about the government's public funding utilization. So this should not be a limiting factor for the new PPP model. The new PPP model is about economic development. So this is the new understanding of the model. So it is a tool to effect economic development. And its source is more like the French model and the UK model, and also that amalgamated with the developing countries' needs. This is the new model of PPP. And China, as well as some of the developing countries, are promoting this particular model with its own philosophy and its own operation model. The developing countries, with China as its lead, in promoting this new PPP model, is not the highest pinnacle of its possibilities, but rather the UN in the 2030 development with its 17 SDG, the 17th SDG in particular. It is about not only private and public cooperation, it is also about community and civil society cooperation. And by so doing, to effect social targets, including environmental targets and energy, renewable energy, and it has to be human-oriented. So I would say this highest level of PPP would be the third generation of PPP model, which is also the UN promulgated or the UN led target of PPP. For One Belt, One Road, in fact, which was raised by China, in fact, it would promote give us a lot of room for world cooperation and for global economic development. So it is not about a country's initiative, but it is China's contribution to the world as a public product, if you will, for the world. It is human-oriented and it provides a historic opportunity. And this One Belt, One Road initiative, which has come up by China, it is about infrastructure projects investment, and PPP model is exactly a tool for achieving that. So only with infrastructural development can there be industrial development. Can the industrial development be competitive? So this is all related, and PPP model provides a very important starting point for One Belt, One Road and infrastructure development. A second point is that the One Belt, One Road innovation is not about a one direction assistance or subsidy to certain countries by the financing side. No, but rather the government will play a leading role to bring in capital from a number of sources. So again, this is where PPP model will come into play. Thirdly, the Chinese initiative of One Belt, One Road is about a win-win situation. It is about building cooperative partnership. It is about sharing of benefits. And this is also the objective of PPP. Fourthly, this Chinese model of One Belt, One Road is inclusive. It's not only about the 64 or 5 countries along the One Belt, One Road region, but it is about the global beneficiaries. Any country which is interested in participating in this effort will be able to do so. It is inclusive, it is integrative, and therefore it is in keeping with the UN target of being human-oriented. And lastly, when we talk about One Belt, One Road initiative, it puts emphasis on coordination, development, and this is exactly in keeping with the target of the UN target of being human-oriented. And therefore, the UN target of sustainable development can be worked through the initiative come up by China, which is One Belt, One Road initiative. And China, as a rising economy, accessing the international arena, and through this China's One Belt, One Road effort, it will be able to realize a sustainable target or development target of UN. And another point, PPP is not just about providing a solution for capitalization, but rather what is important is that we also have to find the good projects as well. So there will have to be governance and operability to PPP model. At present, we have all sorts of issues with regard to projects, but what is important is that there is full emphasis on inclusive development, win-win situation, human orientation, and other sustainable targets.
So based on all these 6 reasons, we need to grasp this opportunity and to further promote the people-first PPP development, which is based on the UN. So this is number 1 reply, and on how to, regarding how to look for, good PPPs, I will explain shortly. Well, Director Kai Neng is working on the standards for the UN on some PPP projects for transport, and tomorrow he will have more opportunity to discuss with you. And now we move on to Alina.
Maybe we decided to split it in a different way. We both represent Belarus here.
Okay.
Alena is working for EBRD at the moment as a government project manager for M10 road reconstruction project, and I'm also involved with E40 inland waterway transport project. So we both represent a Belarusian experience and came here to speak about our projects. So if we could start with the presentation on E40 waterway. Thank you. So first of all, when presenting Belarus, I would like to say that Belarus has already built some strong partnership with China in many respects, including in infrastructure development. And later this week, early next week, Belarusian government delegation headed by president of the country himself, they will be going to Beijing to participate in the conference on One Belt, One Road. We also see a lot of opportunities for possible cooperation, and this is one of the opportunities I would like to present. It's an inland waterway corridor, E40. Next slide, please. You can see the waterway connects 3 countries along the way, starting from southeast in Ukraine, going through Belarus in the middle, and then going to Poland in the northwest. And the connection is along 3 big rivers, Dnieper River in Ukraine, Pripyat River in Belarus, and Vistula River in Poland. There is no direct connection, so a man-made canal was built in southern Belarus. It was actually built more than 200 years ago, when 3 countries, Belarus, Ukraine, and Poland, were one nation, one big state. But since then, the canal was renovated a number of times, especially in the Soviet Union and also in the recent times. However, there's still potential to develop this inland waterway. This route was actually put on the radar by European Union as one of the opportunities to expand the collaboration among countries in Eastern Partnership area. But we still struggle with a number of challenges on that way. Belarus is a landlocked country. We don't have access to the sea. So for us, it's an opportunity to access to the seaports in Baltic Sea and in the Black Sea. But the investment which is currently being done by the government is obviously not enough. We are looking for investors who can come and help with investing in the river port infrastructure, in also multimodal ports along the river route, also in navigation facilities to facilitate automatic and nighttime navigation, and also with other river transport management opportunities. So what we see this is, it's a transnational PPP potentially in many areas, and Belarus, having established good partnership with China in economic area, and also having invested significantly in the capacity in public-private partnership in over last 5 years, I think we could be a good testing ground, a good spot on One Belt, One Road map to implement a transnational PPP project. Just to elaborate a little bit more about PPP capacity of Belarus, we had a major European Union funded project which was implemented by United Nations Development Program, which I was part of, and also United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, who is one of the organizers of this conference, on PPP capacity building in Belarus. As a result, we developed the PPP legislation in Belarus, and we also selected a number of pilot projects which we're currently working on. Alena will speak about the M10 road reconstruction project in a few minutes, and I propose this E40 river route as one of the opportunities to transfer knowledge from China and from other countries in the region and test it on Belarusian ground. That's it.
好，非常感谢带来这个非常有含金量的一个投资的项目。我想，中国无论是我们的投资能力，还是 PP 的设计能力，我们都也提供这方
And
面
I
的
think
服
for
务。
China, we're very interested in getting involved with projects like this. And just now we have seen that actually for, Everbright, my company, we have a lot of investment in Poland, in terms of incineration of garbage. And by end of this month, I have been invited by the Ukrainian government and to go there and to introduce them about the experience of garbage incineration in China and waste treatment. And I hope that, if we have time, perhaps we can discuss further after this. And now we invite Alexandra to give us a talk.
Dear colleagues, could you please put the slides on the screen? I will briefly present the first pilot project, PPP. I'm currently working as the project manager from European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And from the Belarusian government perspectives, this project perfectly fits into the concept of the One Belt, One Road, and has a clear transborder nature. The M10 project was selected by the UNECE Business Advisory Board and was included in EBRD infrastructure project preparation facility pipeline. And with the help of EBRD, not only got the required resources for the preparation of the project, but also gained the unique opportunity to receive the loans from EBRD and IFC for private partner. As you see, the project it's the shortest way from the west of the Europe to the China. And in red, you see the road which will be reconstructed by the private partner in Belarus. Currently, the consultant team from EBRD working hardly in the preparation of the tender documentation, and we hope that all necessary documentation will be ready at the second part of the year. And now we completed the market testing campaign to facilitate the consultation with potential bidders, investors, and financial institutions, and to receive the feedback on the project structure. And after this campaign, we received the really good feedback from 30 international companies, and near half of them were from Asia, but only 10% were from China. And So it's still an excellent opportunity for Chinese investors to have a closer look at the M10 project. On the next slide, you will see the numbers and the figures of the project, and the capex, estimated capex by the consultants is about 200 million. It's not a huge project, but it's still very interesting, and given the fact that it will be the first Belarusian PPP project, and it will provide excellent opportunity to investors to enter to the market, and said the president for the PPP project in regions as a part of the One Belt, One Road concept, and we really hope that it will be really successful first project that implement all features of the One Belt, One Road concept.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. 这也是白俄罗斯的另外一个道路的建设的 PP 的项目，它用的是 DBFO 模式，所以我觉得。刚才是白俄罗斯发布了2个重要的 PP 的
Just
项
now
目
we。have heard 2 important projects from Belarus, and we have heard your president is about to attend the One Belt, One Road summit, and I believe that those 2 projects will be brought to Beijing, and I believe that whether it is in mainland China or Hong Kong, you know, among the enterprises and consultancy firms, there must be a lot of interest to go to Belarus to look for potential investment opportunities. And now we welcome Art Smith.
UNECE, so specialists on PPPs. So please, thank you.
Well, we've spoken a lot today about the potential use of PPPs to support the development of the One Belt, One Road initiative. I'd like to talk a little bit about the experiences that we've heard here this afternoon and how they may relate to the types of PPPs that would be needed to accomplish the One Belt, One Road program. As we look at One Belt, One Road, it's a very ambitious effort that will span portions of 65 countries, thousands of miles of economic development and transport efforts. And as we look at that, there are different types of PPPs that will be required. The simplest case will be where we have a requirement to develop a project within a single country. And projects that we've discussed this afternoon, such as the Taiwan high-speed rail, Shenzhen water, those are examples of the kinds of projects that may be needed, and the experience that we can bring to bear from China will be very valuable. Across the region, you also have other examples you can look at. The government of South Korea has initiated a very effective PPP road program over the past decade or so. That will also be worth exploring as an example. But some of the projects that you will look at as part of One Belt, One Road will cross national borders. You'll be looking at transnational, cross-border projects, some of which may be appropriate to be done as PPPs. What does a cross-border PPP look like? We have several models that have been used to date. One of them is very simply the design, finance, operation, and maintenance, construction, of course, of a asset that spans national borders. I spoke in the previous panel about the N4 toll road between South Africa and Mozambique. That's an example of a cross-border project. That project was contracted in 1996. It opened for traffic in 2000 and has been operating now as a PPP for 17 years. Igor just mentioned the possibility of the E40 waterway as a project that could support the One Belt, One Road initiative. There is, in fact, precedent. The governments of Argentina and Uruguay developed as a PPP the Martin Garcia Channel to open a navigable waterway between their 2 countries along the river Paraná. We also have the potential, as we look at cross-border PPPs, for situations where an output-producing asset is built in one country, which sells its outputs to another country. And within this, we have several subcategories. The output-producing asset can be a PPP, and the distribution networks can be traditional procurement. For example, within this region, we have the Nam Tum 2 hydropower plant in Laos, which was built as a PPP project, and a significant part of its revenue comes from sale of power to Thailand, where Thailand has used public procurement to construct the distribution networks for that power. Also within Asia, we have the example of the Tala power plant. Power plant was built in Bhutan as a public-public partnership where India provided the financing for the hydro plant and Bhutan pledged to sell all of the power to India. But the distribution networks within northern India were built as a PPP. You also have the potential to do both the output-producing asset and the distribution networks as PPPs. So we have multiple ways that we can approach this. Now, as you look at that, these cross-border PPPs do produce different risk profiles than traditional projects done within a single country. In our presentation about the Taiwan high-speed rail, you heard about the political risk as a factor. In a cross-border PPP, investors have to worry about political risk in two countries, in macroeconomic risks in two countries. And so we have a much more complex set of risks that need to be considered. One of the things that experience has shown as you consider some of these projects potentially for One Belt, One Road is that government commitment, always essential in a PPP, becomes even more important in a cross-border project. In the case of the Martin Garcia Channel project, initially very successful inland waterway project in South America, the project eventually failed because although the government of Argentina continued to be committed to this project, the government of Uruguay, faced with some budgetary challenges, decided to drop its financial support for the project. Experience tends to show that creating a bilateral commission between the governments of the two countries can provide some consistency and approach and reduce the political risks and assure vendors that these projects can work in the long run. But what I anticipate is that within the next few years, you'll be pushing the pushing the boundaries of these cross-border projects because it's an area that deserves a great deal of further attention. This is probably the best potential arena within the world today to utilize this model, and so it'll be very exciting to see how you apply it in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Time up actually, so finally I'd like to give only some sentences. So, today we are considering about One Belt, One Road initiative and the PPP model. So today we should remember, several concepts. One is the One Belt, One Road initiative. The second is the PPP models. And at the same time, we should remember SDGs. At the same time, we should remember another 3 E's: ethics, economy, and environment. At the same time, we should remember another 3 P's, people, planet, and profit. So people first, planet first, and profit first. Okay, thank you so much for guests. Thank you, and thank you for all audience. Thank you so much. Enjoy wonderful dinner tonight. Okay, thank you.
You did a very good recovery there. He obviously hadn't told you what the panel was about. You handled that well.